So, the translations are out for My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 397, and while this is a short chapter, there's still a lot that we can talk about in this chapter, particularly when it comes to the battle between All For One and All Might, and a surprise cameo from Nana Shimura in the past? Yeah, we're going to be talking about this chapter, but first, right after this. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Man Drew, and I'm here to do my manga review for My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 397, titled Taking Out the Trash. Yeah, we actually took out the trash a few days ago, so we don't have to take out the trash right now. But do you know who really needs to take out the trash right now? All Might, when he's talking about All For One, which is going to be a core part of what this chapter is about. And there's a fair amount that we need to talk about. For instance, most likely why this chapter is only 7 pages long, how this chapter is most likely going to be a direct continuation into the next chapter, as well as what we actually get in this chapter between the fight of All For One and All Might and the importance of why they are fighting right now. So with that, let's dive into the chapter and let's talk a little bit more meta when it comes to why this chapter may only be 7 pages. And most likely than not, we all know that Horikoshi is going through struggles with his health. We don't know exactly what it is, so I'm not going to speculate on what this could be. But what we know is that when it comes to being a mangaka, they have to go through very strict guidelines and most likely strict timelines of when these things need to be out to the public, and how this could be very stressful on the mangakas themselves. We don't know the exact specifications for it, but we have seen mangaka who are a part of Shonen Jump have very much a lot of health issues, which stems from the fact that they are working a weekly schedule where most likely than not, they aren't getting enough breaks and their health is deteriorating. But when it comes to this chapter, that is most likely a factor, but also just the fact that this chapter is coming out during a Japanese holiday that occurs each year. And typically speaking, from my understanding, these holidays are not as consistent as they are in the States. And because of that, this most likely is the reasoning why, along with other reasonings, for why this chapter is only 7 pages long. Horikoshi did not have enough pages to actually get an entire chapter out, but he had enough content for a small 7-page chapter, which most likely a lot of people are disappointed with, but me personally, I can kind of see why that is the case, and how this may be tying into what we're potentially going to be getting in the next chapter. So just with that meta idea out the way, let's talk a little bit more about the chapter itself. And pretty much when it comes to this chapter, what it is just a all-out fight between All For One and All Might, where we have All Might using a fair amount of strategy in this fight when it comes to his battle against All For One. And how throughout the battle, he realizes that his main strength is the fact that All For One in this moment is being consumed by hatred that he tried to cultivate so that he can steal One For All, and how this is going to be the advantage that All Might needs to actually be able to defeat All For One. And we see this being implemented by him just trash talking All For One, by literally insulting the idea that he wants to be the Demon Lord when he can't even take on someone who's quirkless. And All Might realizes that this is the distraction that he needs if he really wants to defeat All For One. And he realizes that this distraction works because we see that All For One launches a massive attack, but he does so in the most unstrategic way possible, by combining random quirks together and sending All Might flying through multiple buildings. And while it doesn't seem like it's done a lot of damage to All Might in this moment, we actually get confirmation that some of his bones, including his left wrist, have been completely pulverized. But this still falls into the favor of All Might, and he recognizes it. Because while the suit was able to withstand a second attack from All For One, this one is very much a point-blank shot. And we see that he barely survives with injuries, as well as a new type of equipment that comes from his cape. And now this cape ties into the idea of why this suit is so special, because it incorporates all of the students' moves and abilities into it. And this time we're seeing the move or ability being incorporated as Dark Shadow, Utility Cape Auto Guard, which is most likely the reasoning why he was able to withstand that attack. But we still see that the suit itself is heavily damaged and is more or less barely holding on. And how, because of how much damage All Might has taken, he literally has to call upon a technique of the suit to pretty much compress his arm together so he's still able to fight with it, even though most likely than not, he cannot move it. And as it's happening, we get All For One trying to believe that he hasn't fallen for All Might's trap. How he is the one that brings up the idea that he's fighting a worthless piece of trash that has more confidence because he's wearing a trash. But he realizes that if he destroys the suit, then All Might is dead. And he also brings up an idea that because he's wearing a tool, that he cannot surpass his limits, and that only people and their quirks can. And what is very interesting about this aspect is what All Might actually replies to that comment, which is that he might be right. Because we get a flashback back to the cultural festival where All Might tells Deku that heroes that solely rely on support items could eventually lead to their downfall because they rely on them too much, and losing them makes them feel helpless. And in this moment, All Might may be believing those words himself, because at this moment, he is relying heavily on the suit, and that believing that he may lose it may make him helpless. However, we need to realize that he's not just purely relying on the suit itself. He's also relying on the experience that he's gathered as being a hero, and also knowing his enemy. And what's very interesting about this idea is that it actually ties it to a small flashback where we're assuming that this is the first moment that Toshinori met Nana Shimura as they were both attempting to beat up some very menacing thugs or villains. And before we get any more of that flashback, we actually cut to the final page of the chapter of All Might punching All For One in the head, All For One declaring that he's not gonna fall for the trap that was set by All Might, sending out a giant blast of energy, breaking away more of All Might's armor as All Might gives a retort of, "Wow, that's just an excuse, so embarrassing," as the chapter ends. And there's a lot of things that we can really talk about a little bit more in depthly. First of all, the flashback between Nana Shimura and Toshinori. From what we're getting in this chapter, most likely what we're going to be getting in the next chapter is a more continued flashback of Nana Shimura and Toshinori and how they met. And we're probably going to get a better understanding of who she is as a character, as well as what made All Might Toshinori act in that moment. So we may get a different perspective of that fight and really get to understand their dynamic a little bit more. And this could also be setting up a flashback potentially to the first confrontation that we saw between All Might and Nana Shimura versus All For One. So that's going to be something interesting to see within the upcoming chapter, and showing how this chapter is going to be a more direct follow-up into that chapter. But even in this chapter, we get a little bit more confirmation of though this suit, and we get a little bit more confirmation with though this suit is powerful to a certain extent, that it's still not powerful enough to actually stand up against All For One. However, that is not what All Might is trying to do. He's trying to win this fight by stalling All For One, because by doing so is how he's going to get his win off on his most hated foe, as he said in this chapter that it is their fate to fight. So while this chapter is short, it is really building on All Might's character more when it comes to how he uses the suit outside of just the suit itself, as well as diving a little bit more into his flashback and backstory that we are still very hazy on. And now for the most part, this chapter is going to be setting up for the next chapter, which is going to be most likely even more bombastic, or at the very least more informative. But yeah, that's all I really have to say for this chapter for My Hero Academia. So let me ask you this. What did you think of the chapter? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? Do you think that it was too short? Or do you think that Horikoshi needs to take some rest? Leave your thoughts down below, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you want to see more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!